Sometimes you walk through life alone, wondering if anyone understands what you are going through, hoping someone will listen and offer a word to make your day. The Church of God of Prophecy offers unconditional love and support, regardless of what you are going through. Visit cogop.ca for a location near you. The Church of God of Prophecy, developing authentic disciples of Christ.
On the Let's Talk television program, we share solutions to real-life problems with real people, showing how faith guides everyone through the storms of life. We talk about tough issues that affect all generations. Our conversations help you learn, grow, and lead. Help us continue with this great work by partnering with us today. Call 905-625-1278, extension 233, or visit letstalkca.org. We look forward to your partnership with us to change lives. Let's Talk, revealing the heart of Christ through engaging media conversations.
Good evening and welcome to Let's Talk. We'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. We have a very special time of discussion this evening. My guest has been involved in community projects and initiatives for over 20 years. He has a diploma in social service work at Centennial College and a degree in social work at York University. He's been involved with many institutions, including York University, Seneca College, the City of Toronto, Toronto School District Boards, and many others. He has an interest and a passion in supporting people who suffer with mental illness and addictions, especially in the Black community. He currently works with students who need support with their developmental, social, and emotional needs, and spends his time supporting various community and religious initiatives. And this evening, my guest is someone I've known for some time and really admire the way he is, the way he carries himself. He's a servant leader within our faith tradition, the Church of God of Prophecy. And my guest this evening is none other than Jermaine Morrison. We call him Germs. Welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you, sir, man. A pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Now, we're going to get into some of the work that you do, but especially during the last 19 months, how has COVID-19 impacted you and the work that you do?
Boy, COVID's been very, very interesting and pretty rough. But if anything, what COVID-19 has done, especially with all the restrictions, has really allowed me to really kind of put some things out there with regards to mental health. It kind of created more of a platform for me to kind of put an extra voice to some of the things that have been going on, because a lot of people have really been going through it, myself included, since the pandemic and all the lockdown restrictions and all the uncertainty that came with it. So I would say that's how the last 19 months has been for me. It's been impactful, but it's allowed me to really kind of put some things together to see if I can be an advocate for those that suffer with mental health.
Right. Now, I know that you work with a lot of institutions, and the institutions you work with are mainly the learning institution. Mm-hmm. What has it been like for those institutions?
Well, for most people who don't know, I do work for the Toronto District School Board.
Right.
Certainly, there have been a lot of changes and a lot of uncertainty that really did affect a lot of students. It was kind of weird because even before the lockdown, with the changes where students couldn't really socialize the way that they used to, certainly it was very, very, very impactful because they weren't too sure what to do. I noticed one student in particular that I worked with, over time, he actually started to basically become like a hypochondriac because of the things that are happening with, the virus and stuff, that he actually gets a lot of anxiety even when people just accidentally touch his desk. You know what I mean?
Right.
So COVID has really certainly affected um, the mental health of a lot of students, teachers. It's been hard because trying to prepare and to plan in a new system is really, really stressful.
Right.
And a lot of the things that a lot of teachers would do that are sort of like apart from like the regular books and to make learning a lot more enriching has been difficult. Um, to be honest with you, if you ask a lot of students, they're not too fond of even teachers. They're not too fond of like online learning. They really are not. That
Right.
it's not for them. And they miss
Right.
the socialization. They miss talking to people. They miss out, basically, as the old saying goes, reaching out and touching somebody, if you will.
Right. Right.
So it's been difficult at times, but for a lot of teachers, a lot of educators, a lot of students, we're just trying to make the best out of this situation.
Right. Now, the work that you do, working with students the way you do,
Mm.
there's no way you could work from home. What has that been like? Wrestling with it during the lockdown. What was that like?
Oh man, man. I mean, okay, well, okay. I'm gonna okay. I'll be. I would say there's maybe one benefit,
Right.
and that was probably the fact that like I got to sleep in. That was probably the only benefit. Um, but but apart from that, it was difficult. Because it was difficult and at times heartbreaking. So I'll give you this illustration. I usually so the class that I worked in during the lockdown was an autistic class, right? We had
Right.
kids that have autism, but they were very high functioning, and you could tell that it was hard for the kids to learn, especially when they just don't have that one-to-one conversation that
Right.
they can have. Like most people don't really understand that being able to attend to students through technology is really difficult, right? It's
Yes.
not the same as being in the class because if you've ever tried to be in a meeting where people were talking at the same time through like Zoom or Google Classrooms, it's really
Right.
difficult. It's hard to decipher. People are trying to talk, but they're not getting through, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
can be very frustrating for both the educators and for the students, right?
Right.
And so because of it, um, at times, um, students were kind of getting tired of just even looking into a screen. And so we had to institute like screen breaks, so to speak, to make sure that our students are away from the computer, going out stretching, do whatever, because after a while it gets to you. It really does get to you after a while.
But you're also working with kids who need support with their developmental, social, and emotional needs.
Hmm.
So I can just think of how difficult that is.
Hmm.
What are some of the practical things that you have to do when you're talking about kids who are wrestling with their developmental, social, and emotional needs? I mean, I can see that being very difficult for something to be done online because of those special needs they have.
Yeah, it's not really easy because there's only so much you can do, right?
Right,
Um, when a kid is feeling anxious
right,
and they need attention, you can't just simply just be in their face or probably just rub their back or anything like that because a lot of kids have sensory needs. And what I mean
right,
by sensory, so people understand, sometimes, you have certain students that may need like that tight hug, you know what I mean? Or may need that little rub on the back or something that is somewhat fidgety so that they can kind of sort of distract their mind from things that they have to do right in front. As an educator, especially working online, it's very difficult, right? Because you can't provide
right.
those therapeutic
Hmm.
approaches for kids for doing it online. You basically have to depend on the parents to do that. And sometimes for parents, it's difficult because they have to also concentrate on their stuff at their job,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
So it's not like parents are there with the kids on a regular basis because, again, parents are also having to do work online. They have to, concentrate their efforts to their job.
Right.
So it's a very, most people really don't understand how tricky it is to work with this type of population because a lot of the things that would normally help in that sense are no longer available. So you
Right.
have to make those adjustments, and your adjustments are very, very limited. So
Yeah.
that's why, honestly, like it was better, thankfully, that we've at least gone to the point where kids are able to go to school. It helps us to better plan. It helps us to better approach the kids a certain way, and just creates a better learning environment overall.
Right. Right. Now, mental health has come to the forefront, especially during COVID. I would say that it was something that was a stigma, especially in the Black community,
Mhm.
because, it's something we never wanted to talk about or really deal with. Um, and I've read some stats, and you can correct me if I'm off on this,
Mhm.
but they're saying that mental illness is more impactful in the Black community. Do you think that's true? And if that's true, why do you think that is?
Well, I will have to say that the stats are pretty much on point. Um,
Right.
and there's a myriad of reasons. I think there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to, um, well, actually, okay. So I'll put it this way. Um, Part of it is what we've been conditioned with, right? So we as a Black community, and we have to kind of look at some of the determinants of our decisions, right?
Right.
Black people have had to face a lot of oppression for the longest time, right? Um, and it happens on our job, it happens in education, it
Right.
happens in our neighborhoods, it happens in the justice system. So we're conditioned. I remember growing up, and we're basically conditioned to basically hold it down. We have to be strong.
Right.
We
Right.
can't show that we're going crazy. You know what I
Right.
mean?
I
Because
see that word crazy. That's the word we use.
right, and I'm not crazy as they used to say. You're sick in your head.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And part of the reason behind that is that we didn't want to within the Black community to look weak, right? We're already
Right.
having to deal with a whole lot of issues. We don't want people to see us quote unquote crack, if you will,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so we do everything that we can to sort of sweep it under the rug. Now, here's the other side to it, right? Because part of it is what's happening outside of our community, but the other part we have to also admit is that there's some atrocities and traumas that we have done to ourselves, right?
Right.
Some abuses that have come up. So even as an illustration, take for example, um, take for example a Black woman who has been physically abused by whether family members or their partner or whatever. It's been going on for years.
Right.
They go
Correct.
about trying to seek help,
Hmm.
and their concerns are brushed over to the side because they don't want to shame the family, if that makes sense. You understand what
Right.
I'm saying? And
It
so
makes sense.
what happens is that in that situation, the person that has been a victim for years of this type of trauma is having to live with the fact that they're basically on their own. It affects their mental health
Right.
because they have nowhere to turn. They have no one to talk to. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
They're living in fear and their anxiety shoots up, which can lead to things like depression and all sorts of conditions that are out there.
Right.
So when it comes to mental health and even mental illness within the Black community, you know, it's a stigma in part because we want to present ourselves a certain way, but
Hmm.
also the other part is if you talk about mental illness and the causes of somebody's mental health or suffering with mental health, then they're going to have to dig up some of the atrocities that have happened to them over the years. And not to
Wow.
belabor the point, like people have to understand when it comes to mental health and especially mental illness, it's usually a progressive thing, right? It didn't just happen. it normally doesn't happen all of a sudden. There were certain things that were happening over time in life that weren't, I guess you can say, taken care of, if you will. They didn't have
Right.
any support. And sometimes for Black people, there was no access to support, right?
Right.
And so because of it, we're we're having to figure out how to cope through a lot of the very tough and traumatic experiences on our own without really much help, if any.
Right. Right.
And this is basically why it is.
Right. Well, we're going to continue this conversation. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Mhm.
On the Let's Talk television program, we share solutions to real life problems with real people, showing how faith guides everyone through the storms of life. We talk about tough issues that affect all generations. Our conversations help you learn, grow, and lead. Help us continue with this great work by partnering with us today. Call 905-625-1278, extension 233, or visit letstalkca.org. We look forward to your partnership with us to change lives. Let's Talk, revealing the heart of Christ through engaging media conversations.
Welcome back to Let's Talk. My guest this evening is Jermaine Morrison. He's a social worker. He works with the Toronto School Board and a few other institutions. Now, Jermaine, just before the break, you mentioned that mental health don't just happen.
Mhm.
What are some of the signs that I'm struggling with my mental health? What are some of the
Mhm.
warning signs that I need to look for?
Well, if you kind of recognize that something's wrong,
Right.
some of the things that tend to happen, and there's a myriad, but some of the most common ones are, for example, if you find yourself withdrawing yourself from regular social gatherings, let's say, like, I don't want to see my family right now, and that's what
Right.
you're stating. That could be a warning sign that you may be suffering with some sort of anxiety. If you find yourself it's been harder for you to even get out of bed, right?
Right.
And you find yourself having low energy, that's also a sign where you may be suffering with some sort of mental health condition, or mental
Right.
illness, I should say, because there's a difference. Things like even just extreme mood swings.
Mhm.
One day you find yourself awfully irritable. Next thing you know, you're basically like cowering, so to speak, somewhere in the corner, right? That could also be a sign of mental health, and even down to eating. If you find yourself, because this has happened to me a few times, if you find yourself like you're being stressed, and all of a sudden you're going for that bag of chips, and next thing you know, you're going for that not even that slice, that big old wad of cake.
Right.
You know what I mean? You find yourself either overeating or you're eating a lot less, right?
Okay. Okay.
That's also a sign where you may be suffering with some sort of, or that's a sign where your mental health is being impacted negatively. That's
Okay, very good. Now, you also have a passion for supporting and working with people with addictions.
Mhm.
Is there a correlation between addiction and mental health?
Generally speaking, yes. Because when you're talking about addictions,
Right,
it kind of comes back to what the cause is behind it, right? And usually, people that deal with addictions, um, there has been some sort of traumatic experience that has persisted over a period of time, right? Now, don't get me wrong. There are some people that kind of, like, for example,
right,
um, I'm curious about smoking a cigarette or something like that, and now I find myself hooked. You know what I mean? There's that. But there are usually what I'm finding, what some studies have shown, is that there is a bit of a correlation between negative mental health and addictions, right?
okay,
So if a person is addicted to anything between like porn to drugs to um, there's other stuff. So it's
right.
just
Hmm.
leaving me right now. Usually you can find, if you do a case study, there's been some things that have been happening over time. Somebody might have been molested as a child. there might have been some sort of abuse happening within the family, and again,
Right.
you're reaching out for some sort of substance to help you to cope and to get by.
Okay. Now, you started, whether it's a podcast or just some videos you share, it's called Car Talk.
Yes.
And one of them you did was about self-care for men,
Hmm.
almost speaking to men about the fact that sometimes we glorify being a work addict.
Hmm.
Why did you direct that mainly to men?
Hmm. So, I'm going to testify. I'm also one of those workaholics. So I'm
Right.
also speaking to myself too. But here's the thing with Car Talks. Car Talks was brought about like during the pandemic, right?
Right.
I know that a lot of people's mental health has been suffering, and honestly, there was a lot of things that, especially as Black people, we need to kind of like have a discussion about. So when we talk about self care, and I have to actually credit a great friend of mine. Her name is Roxanne Francis, who also used to go to TNCC as well. She's a
Right.
psychotherapist. So she kind of put out something on social media about the myths about self care, and it is true because self care really is what you call care of self, and what
Right.
self care has been painted as is like you go ahead and have a bubble bath, have wine in hand, chocolates on the side, probably going out getting your manicure, pedicure,
Right.
going out shopping, all that type of stuff. And it's not that it's not self care, right?
Right.
It can be self care if you're a guy, but self care is what it is, care of self. So
Right.
you need to look at things that help to take care of you. Look at your finances. Do you have you prepared a budget? Do you speak to a financial planner about how to grow your money and how to save up better for future stuff? That's self
Right.
care. Do you go to the doctor, right?
Right.
That's a huge part of self care. And as I get older, I'm like, I need to go to the doctor. Do you exercise? That is also self care, right?
Right.
We have to get away. We have to get away, and this is why it's important for Black people, us as Black people, to look at the whole totality of what good mental health looks like,
Right.
which
Right.
brings down to how do you take care of yourself? Do you pray? Do you take the time to meditate? Do you take the time to read the Bible or whatever
Right.
religious or spiritual practice that you take part in? Because those are the things that are important to your self care.
Right. So you're looking at self-care in a holistic manner. Now, here's the
Very.
question. You and I are from the same faith tradition. We're Christians. We belong to the Pentecostal movement.
Hmm.
Now, you know, in the past, there were people who feel like because we're Christians, the things you're talking about, we shouldn't worry too much about those things. We should
Right.
be more um, more intent on our spiritual care, and that will take care of everything.
Hmm. So here's my response to that, and I've had to wrestle with that.
Right.
I think for people who are part of the Christian faith, relying on God, praying, reading the Word is your top priority. But that being said, you're not necessarily an island unto yourself. This is why
Right.
God has created us as human beings because we're relational, right?
Right.
And being able to talk to somebody, especially a professional that
Hmm.
can speak to certain things that maybe most people can't, is also as important, right?
Right.
You're not putting God, I don't think you're putting God sort of like on the back burner when you talk about your mental health, because he
No.
understands the hearts and the minds
Of
of
course.
right.
Right.
But he's also like, for example, God has allowed doctors who check our physical bodies, right?
Yeah.
There's also doctors that help us to understand our mental mindset. It just
Right.
depends on which type of therapist you go to. And there's a lot of Christian therapists.
Of
So they
course.
can
Yeah. Hmm.
definitely bring all those pieces together.
Now, if you're seeing a therapist, you're not a good Christian. Okay. Just
Yeah, that,
my faith tradition. You're going to see a therapist. You need to fast and pray about that thing. God will take care of it.
yeah, I,
I'm
I
just,
know.
I'm just being ridiculous.
No, you know what? And that's the thing that unfortunately has put the stigma when it comes to mental health, right?
Right.
We
Correct.
need
Correct.
to, as you rightly said, look at the holistic side of our mental health. We need
Right.
to do and go about ways where we can learn to take care of ourselves, take care of our bodies, take care of our minds. And
Right.
God is definitely not out of the picture in all of it.
Oh, I totally agree. Now, our time is almost finished, but you also mentioned domestic abuse, and you mentioned the fact
Mhm.
that it's easy to talk about the victims, but we never address the people who are suffering in silence. Now,
Mm,
all the stuff we're talking about, mental health,
mhm,
domestic abuse,
mhm,
self-care, all of that stuff,
mhm.
do you think that what can the church do about these things? Mental health, how can we do better in that area? I believe that we have victims of abuse in the church that are
Yep.
silent.
Mhm.
What can the church do?
I think I think very quickly what the church can do and should do is create an atmosphere where we can actually talk about it.
Oh
Um,
boy, you need to repeat that again. Create an atmosphere,
yeah, we have to.
actually an atmosphere where there's a safe place.
Right,
Right,
right, and that's the thing. The church has to be, or the church needs to continue to be a safe place, and
right.
that means we're going to have to embrace very uncomfortable conversations.
Of course,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? Which
Mm.
also means we need to, for example, how does the church do better to view and take care of women within our church, especially the
Right,
ones that have been, whether it be physically abused or sexually abused, right?
right,
We need to have those type of conversations. We need to learn to hold people accountable because there are
right.
people within our congregations that unfortunately have done those things. And so we
Yes,
need to say, you know what? We can't continue on with this because you're already hurting another sister or brother in the faith by your actions.
right.
I know it's much easier said than done,
Oh yeah,
but if the church actually begins to embrace the realities of what's happening within our congregations, then we can be better equipped to actually address it and actually heal. Because
right,
it can
right.
start with us. We just need to do a better job of actually doing it.
Well, I'm happy that we have folks like yourself in the church because about time, I think also there's some education that needs to happen.
Hmm.
We need to educate our people in the things we're talking about. Jermaine, you're also a musician, and before we got on,
Hmm.
Let's Talk, we're talking about the fact that as a musician, you can be pulled in different ways, especially during COVID, where
Yeah.
a lot of churches are needing help.
Hmm.
Have you learned how to say no? Have you learned how to put some boundaries in place as we talk about self care? How has that been for you?
I'm still learning, but I think because right now, since I moved, it has helped to limit how I go about stuff, right?
Right,
As a musician, again, you know, you're trying to help, trying to make sure you can serve in the kingdom. But there is a recognition for myself that, you know what, you're not Superman. You can't be everywhere, all over the place every time. I do need my rest. And
right.
so, for me, even though I still have a servant's heart, I'm still learning and continue to learn to just make sure, what, I'm taking this Sunday off. I'm not here to play, but I can come to visit.
Right. Well, Jermaine, I know you personally. You're a servant leader. I've worked with you before, especially in the music and worship ministry.
Mhm.
And I want to tell you, you're one of the young men I've admired for many years. And I just want to just commend you for the work you've been doing, and especially with mental health, domestic abuse, and in these areas.
Mhm.
And just keep up the good work. And it's been good talking with you.
Yes.
Blessings on you as you continue to serve.
Thank you for this opportunity. And honestly, thank you. I really appreciate it. So thank you
God
for this time.
bless. Keep up the car talk.
Definitely will. Definitely will.
Great. That's all the time that we have for Let's Talk. If you know someone who is suffering with mental health or domestic abuse, you need to help them to find help because we don't want people suffering by themselves. There are lots of resources that are available for them. And so you need to just do all you can to help to make sure that they get the help that they do need. This is also a Christian ministry. We believe in prayer, but as Jermaine mentioned, we believe in prayer, but we also believe that God has provided great help for us, coupled with prayer. So let's keep praying, but also getting the help that we need. Remember, we are a ministry. We need your prayerful support, but we also need your financial support. And so we want to remind you to sow a seed in the ministry. You can send us an e-transfer at donate@cogop.ca. And so you can also mail a check or mail us your contribution. You're at 5145 Tompkin Road, Mississauga, L4W1P1. God bless you. That's all the time that we have for today. We'll see you next time. Let's keep talking.
On the Let's Talk television program, we share solutions to real-life problems with real people, showing how faith guides everyone through the storms of life. We talk about tough issues that affect all generations. Our conversations help you learn, grow, and lead. Help us continue with this great work by partnering with us today. Call 905-625-1278, extension 233, or visit letstalkca.org. We look forward to your partnership with us to change lives. Let's Talk, revealing the heart of Christ through engaging media conversations.
Sometimes you walk through life alone, wondering if anyone understands what you are going through, hoping someone will listen and offer a word to make your day. The Church of God of Prophecy offers unconditional love and support, regardless of what you are going through. Visit cogop.ca for a location near you. The Church of God of Prophecy, developing authentic disciples of Christ.